Hello. Today we're stepping into the world of powerful mafia bosses, where love, power, and betrayal always go hand in hand. Most people think their life changes with a decision. Mine changed because I missed the 11:42 subway by 30 seconds. Rainwater dripped from the ceiling of the Lexington Avenue station in slow, uneven taps that echoed through the nearly empty platform like a leaking clock, counting down to something terrible. My sneakers squeaked against the wet concrete as I hurried down the stairs, clutching my tote bag tighter against my side, my bookstore apron stuffed carelessly inside after another double shift that had left my feet aching and my head pounding. Midnight in Manhattan had a particular kind of loneliness to it. Not silence exactly, the distant scream of trains, the hum of flickering fluorescent lights, a drunk man laughing somewhere too far away to see. But underneath all of it was exhaustion, the kind that settled into your bones when you were 26 years old, juggling nursing school applications, overdue rent, and a future that kept slipping 1 inch further away every month. I checked the subway board overhead and groaned softly. Downtown, 6 train delayed 12 minutes. Of course it was. I leaned against one of the cold steel pillars and rubbed my eyes hard enough to see stars. My reflection stared back at me from the dark train window across the tracks. Pale skin, damp blonde hair escaping my ponytail. Smudged mascara beneath tired blue eyes. I looked exactly how I felt, drained. Behind me, a little boy laughed suddenly, the sound bright and unexpected in the empty station. I turned instinctively. A woman stood near the edge of the platform, holding the hand of a child who couldn't have been older than 5. He wore a tiny yellow raincoat and rain boots that flashed red every time he bounced on his heels. "Mommy, the train's coming," he whispered loudly, like it was the most exciting thing in the world. The woman smiled weakly but looked exhausted herself, dark circles under her eyes, one hand clutching her purse against her chest like she was afraid someone might snatch it away. I gave her a small, sympathetic smile. New York women had a silent language with each other sometimes. Survival recognized survival. The wind changed suddenly. Warm air rushed through the tunnel ahead. The distant growl of a approaching train vibrated beneath my feet. But something else moved too. Fast footsteps, heavy, controlled. My head turned automatically toward the far staircase just as 3 men in dark jackets descended onto the platform. Every instinct I had tightened immediately. They weren't loud, weren't drunk, weren't talking. Somehow that made them worse. The station seemed to shift around them. Even the little boy stopped bouncing. The tallest man scanned the platform once with sharp, quick eyes before nodding toward the opposite end, near the tunnel wall. And that's when I saw him. He stood alone near the yellow safety line, like he had stepped out of another world entirely. Black wool coat, dark hair slicked back from a face too composed to belong in a subway station after midnight. One hand buried in his pocket, the other hanging loosely at his side, stained with blood, calm enough to drip. Just enough to notice. My breath caught before I could stop it. He looked injured, but he didn't look weak. He looked dangerous in the quietest possible way, like the kind of man who could walk into a room and make everyone else forget how to breathe. The fluorescent lights flickered, once above him. His eyes lifted, green, cold, precise. They landed directly on the 3 men approaching from the stairs, then shifted briefly to the mother and little boy standing 20 feet away. Something changed in his expression. Not fear, calculation. The train roared louder through the tunnel now, headlights appearing in the darkness. Around me, people instinctively moved closer to the platform edge. Everyone except him. He remained perfectly still. One of the approaching men reached inside his jacket. My stomach dropped instantly. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe survival. Maybe every warning story women tell each other about danger in empty places. But suddenly the entire station felt wrong. The little boy tugged on his mother's sleeve and pointed toward the arriving train. Mommy, look. Then everything happened too fast. The stranger near the tracks moved sharply for the first time, his gaze snapping toward the tunnel entrance behind me. One of the men shouted something I couldn't understand over the screeching brakes. Another reached forward, aggressively. People started turning, confused, alarmed. My pulse slammed hard against my ribs. The train exploded into the station in a rush of steel and wind powerful enough to whip my hair across my face. The little boy lost his grip on his mother's hand. I saw it happen in fragments. Tiny, red rain boots slipping on wet concrete, the mother lunging forward, the crowd shifting suddenly in panic, and one of the dark-jacketed men moving far too quickly toward the stranger with blood on his hand. Then I saw the flash. Small, metallic, wrong. My body moved before my brain caught up. Maybe because the little boy was directly there. Maybe because the stranger turned at the exact same second. Maybe because some part of me understood that something irreversible was about to happen. I lunged forward through the chaos, just as the station lights flickered overhead again. The stranger's eyes widened for the first time as I crashed into him hard enough to throw us both sideways. Then came the sound, sharp, deafening, followed instantly by pain exploding through my shoulder, like fire tearing through skin. My breath vanished. The world tilted violently beneath me. I heard someone screaming, maybe me, maybe the mother. The platform spun into blurred lights and roaring steel as my knees buckled beneath me. Strong arms caught me before I hit the ground completely. The stranger, his hand locked around my waist with terrifying strength, while the other pressed hard against my shoulder. Warm blood soaked through my coat instantly between his fingers. His face hovered inches from mine now. Too close. Too intense. Rainwater clung to the dark strands of hair falling over his forehead. But it was his eyes I couldn't look away from. Green, sharp enough to cut glass, and suddenly no longer cold. "Stay with me," he said quietly. His voice carried the faint, rough edge of an Italian accent wrapped in absolute control. Around us, people shouted. Footsteps thundered. Somewhere in the station, a child cried hysterically, but all I could hear was him. He looked down at the blood spreading across my coat, then back into my eyes with something dangerously close to fury. "No one touches what's mine," he whispered. And that was the exact moment I realized the stranger I had just saved was not a stranger at all. He was the kind of man entire cities feared by name. Pain does strange things to time. Seconds stretch. Sounds bend. Faces blur at the edges, like rain against glass. I remember the subway lights above me flickering white and gold while someone shouted for an ambulance. I remember the sharp metallic smell in the air mixed with damp concrete and train smoke. But more than anything, I remember the man holding me, his arm locked around my back with terrifying steadiness while chaos exploded around us. "Look at me," he ordered quietly. Not loudly, not desperately. Somehow that made it worse. I tried to focus on his face, but my vision kept slipping sideways. The station spun in fragments around him. Black coats, flashing emergency lights at the far staircase. The little boy crying somewhere behind us. My shoulder burned so badly it felt detached from the rest of my body. "I cannot," I whispered, though I was not even sure if the words came out clearly. His jaw tightened instantly. One of the men from earlier rushed toward us through the crowd. Up close, he looked even larger than I realized before, broad shoulders straining beneath a dark suit soaked with rainwater. "Sir, we need to move now," he said sharply. "Sir, not Mr., not Damien, just sir." The stranger's eyes never left mine. "Get the car ready," he replied calmly, "and clear the station." The larger man hesitated for half a second before nodding once and disappearing back into the crowd. Around us, people were already backing away instinctively, like some invisible force pushed them aside. I heard police radios somewhere near the entrance. More footsteps thundered down the stairs. Yet somehow no one came close to him. No one touched him. The realization crawled slowly through the fog in my head. Everyone here was reacting to this man. Even the police. His hand pressed harder against my bleeding shoulder, and pain ripped another broken breath from my chest. "Stay awake, Claire." My pulse stumbled. I stared at him through blurred vision. "How do you know my name?" For the first time, something almost human flickered across his face. Not softness exactly. Awareness. "Your bookstore apron has your name stitched on it." My gaze drifted downward weakly. Sure enough, the corner of my folded apron stuck out from my tote bag beside us. Embarrassment mixed irrationally with fear. Wonderful. If I survived getting shot in a subway station, at least I had done it while carrying discounted romance novels and peppermint gum in my purse. The stranger leaned closer, suddenly, shielding me from the crowd gathering around us. His coat smelled faintly, like rain, expensive cologne, and something darker beneath it all. Smoke, maybe, or danger itself. "Listen to me carefully," he said, softly enough only I could hear. "When the police ask questions, you did not see faces. You did not hear names. Understand?" Confusion cut through the pain for half a second. "What, Claire?" His voice sharpened slightly. "Understand." Before I could answer, another wave of dizziness crashed through me. The station ceiling tilted violently overhead. He caught me tighter instantly. Somewhere nearby, paramedics finally arrived, pushing through the crowd, with equipment bags swinging at their sides. Relief should have hit me. Instead, I saw the stranger's entire posture change. Controlled. Colder somehow. Like walls slamming back into place behind his eyes. One of the paramedics crouched beside me quickly. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" I nodded weakly. "We need pressure here," the paramedic said, reaching for my shoulder. The stranger's hand remained exactly where it was. The medic glanced up impatiently. "Sir, I need you to move." Their eyes met. The air shifted instantly. I felt it even half-conscious. The paramedic swallowed visibly before looking away first. "Please," he corrected more quietly. The stranger released me with terrifying slowness, like he hated every inch of distance forming between us. Cold rushed over me immediately where his arm had been supporting my back. The medic replaced his hand against my shoulder while another checked my pulse and blood pressure. Questions blurred together above me. Name, age, allergies. Was I losing consciousness? Did I know what day it was? I answered automatically while my gaze kept drifting back toward the stranger standing only a few feet away. Police officers had arrived, now near the station entrance, but none approached him directly. Instead, they spoke quietly with the men in dark coats surrounding him. One officer actually lowered his head slightly while speaking to him. Respect or fear, maybe both. The stranger finally looked toward me again, just as the paramedics lifted me carefully onto the stretcher. For one impossible second, the entire station noise faded behind the weight of his gaze. Green eyes, sharp enough to slice through confusion itself. "Do not let them separate us," he said. I blinked slowly. What? But he had already turned away. One of his men leaned close beside him, speaking urgently into his ear, while another scanned the station with the alertness of a soldier. The paramedics wheeled me toward the stairs fast enough to make the fluorescent lights blur overhead. My shoulder throbbed violently with every movement. Outside, cold rain slapped against my face the second we emerged onto Lexington Avenue. Manhattan after midnight glowed silver beneath the storm. Taxi lights streaked across wet pavement. Sirens echoed somewhere far downtown. They loaded me into the ambulance quickly, while another medic climbed beside me checking monitors and IV lines. "You are going to be okay," she assured me gently. I wanted to believe her. The ambulance doors started to close. then stopped abruptly. A hand caught the edge before they sealed shut completely. The stranger stepped into view again through the rain. One of the paramedics opened his mouth to protest, but immediately fell silent when the man looked at him. 2 minutes, the stranger said calmly. Not a request. The medic nodded instantly and stepped away from the doors. I stared at the stranger in disbelief as he climbed into the back of the ambulance beside me, like he belonged there more than the medical staff did. Rainwater glistened across the shoulders of his black coat. Up close now, I noticed the faint cut near his temple and the dark stains spreading slowly beneath his ribs, where his own injury hid beneath expensive fabric. He sat beside my stretcher without speaking for several seconds, watching me, studying me. "You should be in a hospital, too," I whispered finally. A humorless smile touched the corner of his mouth. "I have survived worse." My breathing hitched as another wave of pain rolled through my shoulder. He noticed instantly. Of course he did. Men like him noticed everything. His hand hovered near mine briefly before stopping himself. Control. Every movement about him screamed control. "You should not have done that tonight," he said quietly. "Done what?" Stepped in front of me. The ambulance lights painted shifting red across his face as rain hammered the roof overhead. Somewhere outside, another siren wailed through Manhattan traffic. I swallowed hard. "There was a kid behind you." Something unreadable cracked behind his eyes, then vanished almost instantly. "Still," he murmured, "people do not take bullets for strangers anymore." The medic outside shouted something about traffic clearance. The stranger glanced toward the ambulance doors before looking back at me one final time. "Get some rest, Claire Bennett." My pulse stumbled again. I never told him my last name. Fear slid cold through my chest, stronger than the pain medication beginning to cloud my head. He saw the realization hit me, saw the panic. Yet somehow his expression only softened slightly. "You are safe now," he said. Then he stepped out into the rain and disappeared behind the closing ambulance doors, while one terrifying thought echoed through my mind the entire ride downtown. Safe from who exactly? Hospitals at 3 a.m. do not feel real. The lights are too bright. The hallways too quiet. Time stops behaving normally inside them. I woke to the steady beep of a heart monitor and the faint smell of antiseptic hanging in cold air. For one disoriented second, I thought I had fallen asleep, studying at the bookstore cafe again. Then pain tore through my shoulder the moment I tried to move. A sharp breath escaped me before I could stop it. "Easy." The voice came from somewhere beside the bed, low, calm, familiar. My eyes snapped open fully. Damian Moretti sat in the chair near the hospital window like he had been there for hours. Black dress shirt, sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms. Dark tie, loosened slightly beneath the open collar. The city lights behind him painted Manhattan in silver and gold through rain-streaked glass, but somehow the room still felt darker with him inside it. My pulse monitor immediately sped up. His gaze flicked toward the machine once, before returning to me. "Your shoulder is going to hurt for a few days," he said quietly. "The doctor says the bullet passed clean through without damaging the joint." My throat felt dry. "You are still here." One corner of his mouth moved slightly, not quite a smile. "You sound surprised." "Because normal strangers did not sit beside hospital beds at 3 a.m. looking like they owned the building. Because normal strangers did not make police officers nervous with a single glance. Because normal strangers definitely did not know my full name before I ever gave it to them." I swallowed carefully. "Who are you?" Silence settled between us for a moment, broken only by rain tapping softly against the glass. Damian leaned back slightly in the chair, one ankle crossing over the opposite knee with controlled ease. Every movement about him looked practiced, deliberate. "Someone you should stay away from," he answered finally. "That is not really an answer. It is the safest one." Frustration sparked weakly through the lingering haze of pain medication. I almost died in a subway station because of whatever happened tonight. I think I deserve a better explanation than that. Something flickered across his face, then disappeared so fast I almost missed it. Guilt, maybe, or anger directed inward. Hard to tell with men like him. His eyes drifted briefly toward my bandaged shoulder before returning to mine again. You were never supposed to be involved. The words sent a chill through me stronger than the hospital air conditioning. Involved in what exactly? Before he could answer, the hospital room door opened abruptly. A doctor stepped inside carrying a clipboard and stopped immediately upon seeing Damien sitting there. I watched the man's posture change in real time. Not fear exactly. Carefulness. Miss Bennett, the doctor said politely, without fully taking his eyes off Damien. How are you feeling? Like I got shot, I muttered. The doctor gave a strained smile. Fair enough. He moved closer, checking my monitors, while avoiding direct eye contact with the man beside me. You lost some blood, but you are very lucky. Another inch, and this would have been significantly worse. Lucky. Strange word for a night that ended with a bullet in my shoulder and a dangerously beautiful stranger sitting beside my hospital bed like some kind of dark guardian angel. The doctor adjusted my IV line quickly. We would like to keep you overnight for observation. No. Damien's voice cut through the room instantly. Calm. Absolute. The doctor froze. Excuse me? She is not staying here. My stomach tightened immediately. Actually, I think that should be my decision. Damien turned toward me slowly. The city lights behind him caught the sharp line of his jaw, and for one impossible second, I understood why dangerous men in old movies always looked so terrifying in silence. Claire, he said quietly, the people responsible for tonight know you saw them. Fear curled cold beneath my ribs. The police are downstairs already, I argued weakly. I will be safer here. His expression darkened almost imperceptibly. No, you will not. The certainty in his voice frightened me more than the words themselves. The doctor cleared his throat awkwardly. Miss Bennett, if there are security concerns, perhaps we can arrange. No hospital security team is equipped to handle this situation. Damien interrupted without raising his voice once. The doctor went silent immediately. I stared between them in disbelief. Why is everyone acting like you are in charge? The room went still. Damien held my gaze for several long seconds before answering. Because people tend to listen when I speak. Something about the honesty in that sentence unsettled me more than if he had lied. A knock interrupted the tension before I could respond. The large man from the subway stepped inside carrying a garment bag and immediately scanned the room with alert, dark eyes. The car is ready, he said quietly. Damien nodded once. Give us a minute. The man hesitated briefly before leaving again. My heart started beating harder against my ribs. I am not going anywhere with you. You do not have a choice. Anger flared instantly despite the pain. That is not how this works. Damien leaned forward, slowly resting his forearms against his knees, closer now. Intense enough to steal air from the room itself. Claire, listen carefully to me. His voice lowered. The men at the subway tonight were not random criminals. They were looking for me. Now they know your face. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. Why? Because you stepped between me and a bullet. The room suddenly felt too small, too bright. My breathing shallowed slightly as the full reality finally started settling into place. This was bigger than one subway incident, bigger than police reports and emergency rooms. Somewhere outside this hospital room existed people dangerous enough to make trained doctors nervous and police officers step aside. And Damien Moretti stood directly in the center of it all. Who are you? I whispered again. This time he answered. Damien Moretti. The name hit the air heavily. Familiar somehow. Like hearing the title of a book everyone else had already read except me. My brows pulled together, weakly. Should that mean something to me? A humorless smile touched his face. Usually it does. Before I could ask another question, the television mounted silently in the corner of the room shifted to breaking news coverage. The volume was low, But the headline at the bottom of the screen froze my blood instantly. Shooting at Lexington Avenue subway station, possibly connected to organized crime investigation. Then a photograph appeared beside the anchorwoman. Sharp green eyes, dark suit, cold expression. Damien. My pulse monitor began screaming faster immediately. Oh my God, I breathed. The anchorwoman continued speaking softly from the television. Businessman Damien Moretti was reportedly present during tonight's incident. Although authorities declined further comment, I turned toward him slowly. Businessman? His expression remained unreadable. That is one way to describe me. Rain hammered harder against the windows now. Somewhere far below us, Manhattan traffic blurred through wet streets, glowing red and white beneath the storm. I stared at the television again, then back at the man sitting beside my bed. Every warning instinct I possessed screamed at me to run. But another terrifying realization hit me at exactly the same time. Damien Moretti was not the thing I needed protection from. He was the thing protecting me from something worse. The first thing I noticed when they moved me out of the hospital was the silence. Not normal silence, expensive silence. The kind created by thick glass windows, polished marble floors, and people trained not to speak unless necessary. Rain still fell over Manhattan when the black SUV carried me through streets, glowing silver beneath streetlights. But inside the vehicle, everything felt insulated from the rest of the world. Warm leather seats, soft instrumental music, barely audible through hidden speakers, the faint scent of cedar and smoke lingering in the air. Across from me, Damien Moretti sat with one hand resting against the steering wheel, while the city blurred behind him in streaks of light. He drove himself. Somehow that unsettled me more than having a driver would have. Men like him were supposed to sit in the back while everyone else handled the danger. But Damien looked like the type who trusted very few people with control. My shoulder throbbed steadily beneath fresh bandages every time the SUV turned a corner. Pain medication dulled the sharpest edges, but exhaustion still dragged heavily through my body. I stared out the tinted window, watching familiar streets disappear farther downtown. Where are we going? Damien kept his eyes on the road. Somewhere secure. That is not an address. It is enough for tonight. Frustration simmered weakly beneath my exhaustion. You cannot just decide to remove me from a hospital because you think it is safer. I did not remove you because I think it is safer. His voice remained calm. I removed you because it is. I folded my arms instinctively before immediately regretting the movement when pain shot through my shoulder. Damien noticed instantly. Of course he did. One hand tightened slightly against the wheel before relaxing again. Do not do that, he said quietly. Do what? Pretend you are not hurting. My throat tightened unexpectedly. Strange how concern sounded different, coming from someone dangerous. Sharper somehow, more deliberate. Outside, traffic thinned as the SUV crossed farther toward the Upper East Side. Towering buildings rose into the rain, dark sky like steel cliffs, reflecting white and gold from passing headlights. The city looked colder, after midnight, harder. I still do not understand why this is happening, I admitted softly. I was just trying to help. Damien finally glanced toward me briefly at a red light. Green eyes steady, controlled. That is exactly why this is happening. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed through the car speakers, the screen illuminated with a single name. Luca. Something shifted in Damien immediately. Not weakness. Softer than that. Human. He pressed the answer button through the dashboard controls. What is wrong? He asked instantly. A small, nervous voice answered through the speakers. Uncle Damien, the child from the subway. Recognition hit me immediately. Damien's posture eased, almost imperceptibly. I am here, Luca, Sophia said. There were police outside the building. Everything is fine. Did they hurt you? Silence lingered for half a second too long. No. The boy hesitated again. Did someone get hurt because of me? Damien's grip tightened on the wheel. No one blames you for tonight. The ache in my chest surprised me. Hearing fear in a child's voice always did something to me. Maybe because fear sounded the same at every age. Will you come home soon? Luca asked quietly. Damien looked briefly toward me again before answering. Yes. And Luca? Yeah. Do not leave your room until I get there. The line went silent after a soft agreement. Damien ended the call without another word. I stared at him openly now. That was, the little boy from the subway. He nodded once. My nephew. Something about the answer rearranged pieces inside my head unexpectedly. Dangerous men were not supposed to sound gentle with children. They were not supposed to reassure scared little boys in quiet voices while driving through Manhattan rainstorms at 2 in the morning. He seemed scared. Damien's expression darkened slightly. He has reason to be. I looked down at my bandaged shoulder. Apparently so do I. The SUV finally slowed before massive iron gates illuminated beneath soft security lights. My pulse stumbled immediately. Beyond the gates stood a building that looked less like a home and more like the kind of estate newspapers photographed from helicopters. Stone walls, floor-to-ceiling windows glowing warm gold against the storm. Security cameras rotating silently along the perimeter. The gates opened automatically before we even stopped moving. You live here? Damien parked beneath a covered entrance, where 2 men in dark coats immediately stepped forward. For now, that answer somehow felt more unsettling than if he had simply said yes. One of the men opened my door instantly while another handed Damien an umbrella without speaking. Everything about this place moved with frightening precision, like a machine built around one man. Damien came around to my side before I could attempt getting out alone. Rain hammered loudly against the stone driveway beyond the covered entrance, while cold wind curled through the air. I can walk, I muttered automatically when he reached toward me. I know, but he still placed one steady hand carefully against my lower back, guiding me forward anyway. Warmth spread unexpectedly through my chest at the contact. Not romance, not attraction. Something more dangerous than that. Safety. Inside, the mansion swallowed sound immediately. Black marble floors reflected chandelier light overhead, while enormous windows framed the storm outside like moving paintings. Everything smelled faintly of cedarwood and expensive whiskey, and my wet sneakers suddenly felt painfully out of place against polished stone. A woman in her late 50s appeared almost instantly from a nearby hallway. Silver threaded through her dark hair, gathered neatly at her neck, and despite the elegant black dress she wore, something maternal softened her entire presence. Her eyes landed on my bandaged shoulder immediately. "Madonna," she whispered. "She is hurt." Damien removed his coat without looking away from me. "Sophia, this is Claire Bennett." The woman moved closer at once. Poor thing. Before I could respond, she gently touched my uninjured arm with surprising warmth. "Come. You need tea and rest immediately." I blinked in confusion. Somehow I expected armed guards and interrogations, not tea. Damien handed his coat to one of the waiting men before speaking quietly to Sophia in Italian, too fast for me to understand. Her expression changed instantly halfway through his sentence. Concern. Real concern. She looked back toward me more carefully after that. "The blue room is ready," she said softly. Damien nodded once, then his gaze returned to me fully for the first time since entering the house. "You will stay here tonight." It should have sounded controlling. Maybe it was. But exhaustion dragged too heavily through my body to argue properly anymore. "And tomorrow?" I asked quietly. Damien held my gaze for several long seconds, while thunder rolled faintly outside beyond the mansion walls. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "we figure out who wants you dead, because you saved my life." Sleep should have come easily, after everything that happened. Blood loss, pain medication, emotional shock, but fear keeps strange hours. I lay awake beneath impossibly soft blankets, staring at the ceiling of a bedroom larger than my entire apartment, while rain slid quietly against floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. Somewhere below, the city still moved in distant streams of white headlights and glowing buildings, but inside Damien Moretti's mansion, everything felt suspended outside normal time. The Blue Room, as Sophia called it, looked like something from an old luxury hotel. Dark wood walls, a fireplace glowing softly near the sitting area, fresh flowers arranged beside the bed like someone expected injured women to appear regularly in the middle of the night. Even the air smelled expensive somehow. Cedar wood and linen and faint traces of lavender drifting from the sheets. None of it felt real. My shoulder pulsed steadily beneath clean bandages every time I shifted beneath the covers. The doctor Damien brought to the house had checked the wound again almost immediately after we arrived. Quiet man, gray hair, calm hands. He barely looked surprised, treating gunshot injuries inside a billionaire's mansion at 2 a.m. That alone should have terrified me more than it did. A soft knock interrupted the silence near midnight. Before I could answer, the door opened slightly, and Sophia stepped inside carrying a silver tray. Tea steamed gently beside a small bowl of soup that smelled rich and comforting enough to make my stomach ache with sudden hunger. "You need to eat," she said softly. "The medication is strong." I pushed myself upright, slowly, against the pillows, trying not to wince. Sophia noticed anyway. She noticed everything. "Men," she muttered under her breath while setting the tray beside me. "Always chaos. Never caution." A small laugh escaped me unexpectedly. It hurt my shoulder immediately. "You sound like you have known Damien a long time." Sophia's expression softened as she adjusted the blanket near my arm with practiced care. "Since he was younger than Luca." Something in her voice carried affection, layered over exhaustion, like loving someone dangerous required permanent patience. I hesitated before asking quietly, "Is he really as bad as the news says?" Sophia went still for half a second. Then she handed me the tea carefully before answering. "People fear power when they do not understand it. Not exactly a yes, not exactly a no, either." I wrapped both hands carefully around the warm mug while thunder rolled faintly outside beyond the windows. "That sounds like something someone says when the answer is complicated." A sad smile touched her face. The world around Damien has always been complicated. Before I could ask another question, voices drifted faintly from the hallway outside the bedroom. Male voices, tense. Sophia noticed my expression immediately. "Stay here," she said gently. Then she crossed the room and closed the bedroom door more firmly behind her on the way out. Silence settled again after she left, but now curiosity kept sleep even farther away. I carefully slid from the bed despite the protest in my shoulder and moved slowly toward the doorway. Cold marble pressed beneath my bare feet as I cracked the door open slightly. The hallway beyond glowed dimly beneath soft golden lights. Downstairs, voices echoed sharply from somewhere near the entrance hall. I could not hear every word clearly, only fragments drifting upward through the mansion. "The Russians are already moving people across Brooklyn. Then move ours first." Damien's voice, calm, controlled. And the witness, another voice this time, older. She was seen at the station. Silence followed for one dangerous second too long. Then Damien answered quietly enough to send chills down my spine. "Claire Bennett is not a witness. She is under my protection." Protection. The word should have comforted me. Instead, it settled heavily inside my chest. Because men like Damien did not protect people casually. Men like Damien claimed things, controlled them, kept them close. Another voice spoke lower this time. "You are getting emotionally involved." The air changed instantly downstairs. Even from halfway across the mansion, I felt it, Cold, sharp, dangerous. Watch your next sentence carefully, Damien said softly. Silence followed, long enough to make my pulse climb. I stepped back from the doorway immediately before anyone upstairs could notice me listening. My shoulder throbbed harder now from standing too long, but adrenaline kept exhaustion at bay. Emotionally involved, the words echoed unpleasantly in my mind while I returned carefully toward the bed. Before I could climb back beneath the blankets, another sound stopped me completely. Small footsteps, padding softly outside the room. Then the door creaked open, just enough for a little face to peek through. Luca. His tiny yellow subway raincoat was gone, now replaced by dark blue pajamas, slightly too big for him. His green eyes widened slightly when he saw me standing. "You should not be out of bed," he whispered seriously. I stared at him in surprise, before laughing softly, despite myself. "I think that is my line." He stepped into the room, carefully clutching a stuffed wolf beneath one arm. Up close, he looked even younger than I remembered from the subway station. Pale skin, dark curls, still damp from a bath, but his eyes carried something older inside them. Fear, maybe. The kind children learned too early when the adults around them lived dangerous lives. Sophia said, "You got hurt because of me." My chest tightened immediately. No. I crouched, carefully despite my protesting shoulder, so we stood closer at eye level. "None of tonight was your fault." Luca looked unconvinced. Uncle Damien was angry. "I do not think he was angry at you." The little boy stared down at the stuffed wolf in his hands for several seconds before speaking again. "He gets scary when people he loves get hurt." The room suddenly felt much quieter. "Does that happen a lot?" Luca shrugged slightly. "Only when he is afraid." Afraid. The word sounded wrong, attached to Damien Moretti somehow. Impossible, almost. Men like him inspired fear. They did not feel it. Footsteps approached quickly outside before the door opened wider again. Damien appeared instantly, dark tie gone now. Shirt sleeves still rolled up, exposing strong forearms, marked faintly by old scars beneath the warm hallway lights. His eyes moved first to Luca, then to me, standing beside the bed. Relief flickered across his face so fast I almost missed it. "Luca." His voice remained calm, but something underneath it tightened. "You should be asleep." The little boy lowered his head immediately. I wanted to see if she was okay. Damien's gaze shifted toward me again, intense enough to steal warmth from the air itself. "She should be resting." Luca nodded guiltily before moving toward the door. Halfway there, he paused suddenly and looked back at me. "You were brave tonight." Then he disappeared into the hallway before I could answer. Silence settled heavily behind him. Damien remained near the doorway, watching me too closely for comfort. "You should not be standing," he said finally. Apparently nobody in this house thinks I can survive 5 minutes without supervision." A faint shadow of amusement touched his face before vanishing again. Then his eyes lowered briefly toward the edge of my oversized sleep shirt, where fresh white bandages showed beneath the collar near my shoulder. His expression darkened instantly. "Does it hurt?" Strange question. Softly asked. Dangerous men were not supposed to sound gentle at 2 a.m. while standing barefoot in hallway light. I swallowed carefully. A little. Damien stepped closer then, slow enough to give me time to move away if I wanted, but I did not. That realization frightened me more than anything else tonight. His hand lifted briefly toward my injured shoulder before stopping inches away like he physically restrained himself from touching me. "You should have let me die in that station," he murmured quietly. My breath caught instantly. "Do not say that." Green eyes locked onto mine. Heavy, unreadable. "Claire," he said softly, "you have no idea what saving me is going to cost you." Morning inside, Damien Moretti's mansion arrived without sunlight. Thick gray clouds hung over Manhattan, turning the floor-to-ceiling windows into mirrors of rain and steel instead of sky. I woke slowly to the smell of coffee and the distant sound of piano music drifting softly through hidden speakers somewhere downstairs. For one peaceful second, I forgot where I was. Then my shoulder pulsed sharply beneath the bandages, and reality came crashing back all at once. Subway station. Gunshot. Damien. The mansion. I stared at the unfamiliar ceiling above me, while anxiety settled heavily into my chest again. My phone sat charging beside the bed, where someone had placed it neatly overnight. The screen glowed with missed calls and unread messages the second I picked it up. 12 missed calls from Emily, 3 from my bookstore manager, 2 unknown numbers. My stomach tightened immediately. Emily was my roommate and best friend since community college. If she had turned on the news last night, she was probably losing her mind. I pressed call before I could overthink it. She answered on the first ring. Claire. Relief and panic hit at once through the speaker. Oh my God, where are you? I saw the subway thing on the news, and your manager said you never came home, and I swear if you are dead, I am going to actually kill you myself. Despite everything, a weak laugh escaped me. I am alive. You sound terrible. I got hurt. Silence slammed through the line instantly. What do you mean hurt? I closed my eyes briefly. How exactly was I supposed to explain this? Sorry, Emily. I got caught in what looked suspiciously like organized crime crossfire, and now I am recovering inside a mansion owned by the most feared man in New York, Claire. Her voice sharpened with fear. Talk to me. Before I could answer, movement near the doorway caught my attention. Damien stood there watching me quietly. Black dress shirt again, dark slacks, no tie. Somehow he looked more dangerous without one, like he had not bothered pretending to be civilized yet today. I will call you back, I said quickly into the phone. Claire, I ended the call before she could protest. Damien's eyes lowered briefly toward the phone, still clutched in my hand. Your friend deserves to know you are safe. My friend deserves a lot more explanation than I currently have. He stepped into the room, slowly. Fair. That single word surprised me enough to silence my irritation for half a second. Damien rarely sounded defensive. Men like him usually expected obedience instead of accountability. Did you sleep? He asked. Not really. His gaze flicked toward the dark circles beneath my eyes like he already knew the answer. Sophia made breakfast. I am not hungry. You need to eat. The calm authority in his voice irritated me immediately. Do you always tell everyone what to do? Something almost resembling amusement touched his face. Usually they listen faster than you. I pushed the blankets aside carefully and stood despite the ache in my shoulder. I am going home today. Silence. Heavy enough to shift the air pressure in the room itself. Damien did not move, did not blink. No, just one word. Quiet. Absolute. Anger. Flared instantly through my exhaustion. You cannot keep me here. I can keep you alive here. That is not the same thing. Damien crossed the room slowly until only a few feet separated us. Too close. Everything about him felt too close lately. His height, his attention, the way he looked directly at me like he could see every thought I tried hiding. Claire, he said quietly, the men responsible for last night have already started searching hospitals. Fear slipped cold through my stomach despite myself. How do you know that? Because I have people looking for them too. There it was again, that reminder. Damien existed in a world where men searched for enemies before sunrise, and doctors made house calls to private mansions without asking questions. I folded my arms instinctively, before wincing at the movement again. Damien noticed immediately. His eyes darkened slightly. Sit down before you reopen the wound. Stop talking to me like I am one of your employees. Then stop acting like you are not injured. Frustration crackled sharply between us. Outside, rain streaked down the massive windows behind him, turning Manhattan into blurred silver shadows. I had a life before last night, I whispered. A normal life. Something changed in Damien's expression then. Briefly. Regret, maybe. I know. Do you? My voice cracked unexpectedly, because right now I do not even understand what is happening to me. Damien went quiet for several long seconds. Then he surprised me again. Neither do I. The honesty in his voice hit harder than anger would have. Before I could answer, another knock sounded at the bedroom door. Sophia stepped inside, carrying a breakfast tray, while Luca hovered shyly behind her, clutching the same stuffed wolf from last night. The little boy brightened immediately when he saw me standing. "You are awake." Damien stepped back slightly as Luca entered the room. The tension eased instantly around him in ways I was starting to notice more often. The child climbed carefully onto the edge of the sitting chair near the fireplace, while Sophia set the tray beside me. Fresh fruit, toast, coffee, eggs. Enough food for someone recovering from a gunshot wound, apparently. "Luca insisted on bringing you breakfast himself," Sophia explained gently. Luca shrugged awkwardly. "You saved me too." My chest tightened painfully. "I saved your uncle." "Yeah," he said quietly. "But if something happened to him—" He stopped there, did not finish the sentence. He did not have to. The room fell softer somehow after that. Even Damien looked away briefly toward the rain outside the windows. Luca reached into his pajama pocket suddenly and pulled out something small wrapped carefully in tissue paper. "I wanted you to have this." I unwrapped it slowly. Inside sat a silver subway token attached to a thin chain. Old, worn, smooth around the edges from years of handling. "My mom gave it to Uncle Damien before she died," Luca explained softly. "He says it is lucky." I looked up immediately toward Damien. Shock crossed his face for the first time since I met him. Real shock. Luca, the little boy, looked suddenly nervous. I wanted her to have it. Damien stared at the token resting in my palm for several silent seconds. Something unreadable moved behind his eyes. Grief, maybe, or memory. Then he looked at me again with an intensity that stole the air from the room entirely. "Do you know what that means?" he asked quietly. I swallowed hard. "No." Damien's voice lowered almost to a whisper. "Neither does he." But the way he looked at me afterward made one thing terrifyingly clear. Whatever happened in that subway station had already changed something inside this house forever. By the third day, inside Damien Moretti's mansion, I started understanding something dangerous about fear. It changes shape when you live beside it long enough. At first, I had been terrified of the house itself, the armed guards near every entrance, the black SUVs arriving at strange hours, the men in dark suits speaking quietly into earpieces while scanning every hallway like soldiers expecting war. But fear evolves. Slowly, the mansion stopped feeling threatening and started feeling protected. That realization scared me far more than anything else. Rain still haunted Manhattan every morning that week. Gray skies pressed low over the city, while thunder rolled somewhere distant beyond the East River. I sat, curled carefully into one of the oversized library chairs near the mansion's fireplace, with a blanket around my shoulders and a book open in my lap that I had not actually read a single page of in 20 minutes. My shoulders still hurt, though less sharply now. The bruising had spread beneath my skin in deep shades of purple and blue along my collarbone, and every movement reminded me how close everything came to ending differently in that subway station. Across the room, Luca sat cross-legged on the floor building a tower from black dominoes, while soft jazz played quietly from hidden speakers overhead. "You are cheating," I informed him seriously when he stole an extra piece from the box beside him. Luca looked up immediately with wide green eyes full of fake innocence. "I am adapting strategically." A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. "That sounds exactly like something your uncle would say." "That is because he says it all the time." Luca grinned proudly before adding another domino carefully to the tower. Strange how normal moments could exist inside abnormal places. For almost an hour we stayed there peacefully, while rain tapped softly against the enormous windows overlooking the city. No guns, no fear, no dangerous conversations drifting through hallways, Just a little boy building domino towers while I pretended my life had not completely unraveled in less than 72 hours. Then the library doors opened. The room changed instantly. Damien walked inside, still wearing a charcoal gray overcoat dampened slightly from rain. One hand loosened the knot of his dark tie while the other held his phone against his ear. "No," he said calmly into the receiver. "I do not care what Petrov promised them. Move the shipment tonight." His eyes landed on me mid-sentence. Something unreadable flickered across his face before softening almost imperceptibly. "Call me back in 20 minutes. He ended the call immediately afterward. Luca brightened instantly. "Uncle Damien." Damien crossed the room toward us while removing his coat. "How is the tower?" "Strategically successful." A quiet huff of amusement escaped Damien as he glanced toward me knowingly. "I see Claire is teaching you corruption." "I am teaching him honesty," I corrected. Damien's gaze shifted fully toward me then. Warm fireplace light caught faint exhaustion beneath his eyes. For the first time since I met him, he looked tired. Truly tired. Not physically, soul tired. Like someone carrying too much weight for too many years. Luca continued stacking dominoes quietly, while Damien moved closer toward the fireplace. "How is your shoulder?" he asked softly. "Better. You are still in pain." "Not a question." I sighed. "Apparently, everyone in this house has become medically obsessed with me. You were shot protecting my family." His voice lowered slightly. "Forgive us for noticing." The words settled strangely in my chest. My family. Not me. Not himself. His family. Before I could answer, one of the domino towers collapsed suddenly across the rug with a sharp clattering sound. Luca flinched violently. Every color drained from his face instantly. My heart tightened immediately at the panic that flashed across his expression. He scrambled backward, away from the fallen dominoes, breathing too fast. Luca, Damien, moved instantly, fast enough to startle me. 1 second he stood beside the fireplace. The next he was kneeling beside the boy, with both hands steady on his shoulders. "Look at me." Luca's breathing shook harder. "I am sorry. I did not mean Luca." Damien's voice remained calm, controlled. "Breathe." The little boy stared at the floor, trembling visibly, while Damien guided him carefully through slow breaths. Not impatient, not angry. Gentle. Completely gentle. I watched silently from the chair, unable to look away. This was not the man newspapers described. This was not the cold criminal mastermind television anchors warned people about. This was someone holding a frightened child together, piece by piece, with patience so practiced it hurt to witness. After a minute, Luca finally calmed enough to breathe normally again. Damien brushed dark curls carefully back from the boy's forehead. "Better?" Luca nodded weakly. The sound surprised me. "I know." Damien glanced briefly toward me, then back toward his nephew. "You are okay." Luca leaned instinctively against Damien's chest afterward like he had done it 1,000 times before. Something painful moved through me watching that, because I suddenly realized Luca trusted Damien completely. Children always know the truth about people eventually. They know who feels safe, and Luca looked at Damien like the world could end around him, as long as his uncle remained standing nearby. Damien looked up unexpectedly then and caught me staring. Heat rushed instantly into my face. Held my gaze for one impossible second too long before speaking quietly to Luca again. "Why do not you go see if Sophia finished those cookies she promised?" Luca brightened immediately and sprinted from the room, barefoot, moments later. Silence settled softly behind him once the doors closed. Damien remained kneeling beside the fallen dominoes for several seconds before standing slowly. "Loud sounds still affect him sometimes," he explained. "Since his mother died." The ache in his voice surprised me more than the words themselves. "What happened to her?" Damien's expression shifted immediately. Not cold exactly. Closed, like iron doors slamming shut behind his eyes. "A car accident." Simple answer. Too simple. I felt it instantly. But before I could question further, Damien stepped toward the fireplace instead. You should not get attached to Luca. The statement hit me hard enough to steal my breath. Excuse me? He stared into the flames, rather than at me. This life is not safe for people like you. Anger flared instantly beneath my confusion. People like me, good people. The words sounded almost bitter. I stood too quickly from the chair, immediately regretting it when pain pulled sharply through my shoulder. Damien noticed instantly and moved toward me on instinct before stopping himself halfway there. Do not, I snapped softly. Do not act like you care, and then say things like that. His jaw tightened. Claire, no. My voice cracked unexpectedly. You do not get to decide what kind of person I am or what I can handle. Silence stretched heavily between us, while rain battered the windows harder outside. Damien stared at me with an intensity that made my pulse stumble unevenly. You think this is temporary, he said quietly. You still believe eventually you walk out that door and your life returns to normal. Fear curled slowly through my stomach because part of me already knew he was right. Damien stepped closer then, close enough for me to see the exhaustion hidden beneath his controlled expression. Close enough to smell rain and cedar wood clinging faintly to his clothes. Claire, he said softly, men are already dying because you stood beside me that night. My blood went cold instantly. What? Regret flickered across his face too late. He had not meant to say that much. Damien, panic rose sharply through my chest now. What does that mean? But before he could answer, a deafening alarm suddenly exploded through the mansion. The alarm did not sound like a normal security system. It sounded like war. Sharp metallic pulses exploded through the mansion loud enough to shake the library walls, while red emergency lights flashed suddenly across the ceiling. My heart slammed painfully against my ribs. Every instinct inside me screamed, danger. Damien moved instantly. 1 second he stood beside me. The next he had crossed the room, reaching for my wrist with controlled urgency. Stay behind me. The command came low and absolute. Before I could respond, the library doors burst open, and 3 men in dark suits entered fast enough to make my pulse spike higher. North Gate breach, one of them reported sharply. Vehicle forced the checkpoint. Damien's entire expression turned to ice. Luca? Sophia already moved him to the safe room. Relief flickered across Damien's face for less than a second before disappearing completely. How many? Unknown. Rain hammered violently against the giant windows now, while distant thunder rolled over Manhattan. Somewhere outside, tires screeched faintly through the storm. My breathing started coming too fast. This was real, not news reports, not rumors. Real people were trying to get inside this house right now. Damien turned toward me immediately, noticing the panic spreading across my face. Claire. His voice lowered slightly. Look at me. I tried, but another alarm blared through the hallway, and adrenaline crashed harder through my system. My shoulder throbbed sharply beneath the bandages, while my chest tightened painfully. Too fast. Everything felt too fast. I cannot breathe, I whispered. Damien's gaze sharpened. Instantly, panic attack. One of the guards moved toward the hallway again. Sir, we need to relocate immediately. 5 seconds. Damien stepped directly in front of me then, blocking out the flashing lights and chaos around us completely. Claire. His voice cut through the panic like a blade. Calm. Controlled. Breathe with me. My lungs refused to cooperate. My hands shook violently now. I cannot. Yes, you can. He took both my trembling hands before I could pull away. Warm, steady. Look at me. Only me. Somehow I did. Green eyes locked onto mine while alarms screamed through the mansion around us. The entire world narrowed strangely after that. Just his voice, his hands, the steady rise and fall of his breathing. Slow inhale, he instructed quietly. Good. Again. I copied him, shakily. Once. Twice. The crushing pressure in my chest eased slightly. Damien never looked away from me once, not even when another guard appeared at the doorway shouting something about perimeter teams moving into position. Again, Damien murmured, softly, "You are safe, safe." Strange word to hear, while surrounded by armed men inside a mansion under attack. Yet, somehow, my breathing finally steadied. Damien's thumbs brushed lightly across my shaking hands before he released them carefully. "Better?" I nodded weakly. Something unreadable moved behind his eyes then. Not satisfaction, relief. Real relief. Good. His attention snapped instantly back toward the guards afterward. Cold, again. Dangerous, again. "Get her downstairs." "What?" I stared at him in disbelief. "I am not leaving Luca." Damien stepped closer immediately. "Claire, no." Fear sharpened my voice unexpectedly. "You said people are coming because of me. Fine. But I am not hiding somewhere while a little boy sits terrified upstairs." Silence hit the room hard. One of the guards actually looked stunned by my answer. Damien stared at me for several long seconds while emergency lights flashed red across his face. "You really do not understand self-preservation," he said quietly. "And you really think you can order everybody around whenever you want." To my surprise, the corner of his mouth moved slightly. Not amusement, exactly. Something warmer, dangerous, in a completely different way. Before he could answer, another voice crackled sharply through one guard's earpiece. Movement near the east wall. Damien's expression hardened instantly again. "Take Claire and Luca to the lower level." "You are coming too," I said immediately. His gaze snapped back toward me. "Claire, that was not a request." One of the guards looked like he physically forgot how breathing worked for a second. Apparently people did not speak to Damien Moretti that way often, but instead of anger, something strange crossed his face. Almost disbelief, like he could not decide whether I was brave or completely insane. Another loud crash echoed faintly somewhere outside the mansion. Instinctively, I moved closer toward him before realizing what I was doing. Damien noticed, too. His eyes lowered briefly toward the silver subway token, still hanging around my neck before returning slowly to my face. "Stay close to me," he said softly. Not a command this time. Something more personal than that. The group moved quickly through the mansion afterward. Marble hallways blurred around us beneath flashing red emergency lights while guards spoke urgently into radios from every corner. Somewhere downstairs, Luca ran straight into Damien the second we entered a secure hallway lined with reinforced steel doors. The little boy looked terrified. Uncle Damien immediately crouched beside him, despite everything happening around us. "Hey," his voice softened instantly again. "Look at me. You remember the rules." Luca nodded shakily. "Stay quiet. Stay hidden. Good." Damien brushed one hand carefully through the boy's curls. "You are being very brave." My chest tightened painfully, watching them together. Because even now, in the middle of chaos, Damien's first instinct was protecting the people he loved. A woman's voice suddenly echoed through the hallway, speakers overhead. "Perimeter secure. Repeat. False breach confirmed." The entire corridor went still. One of the guards pressed a hand against his earpiece, listening carefully. Then relief visibly loosened his shoulders. "Delivery truck accident outside the north gate," he explained. Security system triggered automatically. Silence followed. Heavy, exhausted silence. My knees almost buckled from the adrenaline crash afterward. Damien noticed immediately and caught my elbow before I lost balance completely. Warm fingers wrapped carefully around my arm. Easy. I let out a shaky breath I did not realize I had been holding. Around us, guards slowly dispersed, while emergency lights finally stopped flashing overhead. Luca clung tighter to Damien's side, looking emotionally exhausted. The little boy's gaze drifted toward me. Then, "Are the bad men gone?" Damien answered before I could. "They were never inside." Luca nodded slowly, but still looked uncertain. I understood the feeling, because the fear had not disappeared from me either. It lingered beneath my skin now like cold rainwater. Damien must have sensed it somehow. He looked down at me, still standing close enough to feel warmth radiating from his body. "You are safe here," he repeated quietly. This time, I almost believed him. Almost. Then one of the guards returned suddenly from the hallway, holding something small wrapped carefully inside a clear evidence bag. "Sir," he said quietly. Security found this near the east gate after the alarm." Damien took the bag instantly. The second his eyes landed on whatever sat inside it, every trace of warmth vanished from his expression. My stomach tightened immediately. "What is it?" Slowly, Damien turned the clear bag toward me. Inside rested a single silver subway token, identical to the one hanging around my neck. The subway token looked harmless, small, worn silver edges. A faded engraving, scratched by years of use. But the second Damien saw it inside the evidence bag. Something changed in him so completely that even Luca noticed. The little boy moved instinctively closer to my side, while silence spread heavily through the hallway. "Where exactly was this found?" Damien asked quietly. Too quietly. The guard swallowed once, before answering. "Outside the east wall, near the security cameras." Damien's jaw tightened hard enough to sharpen the line of his face beneath the hallway lights. "No fingerprints. None." Another silence followed, dangerous this time. I looked down automatically toward the matching token hanging against my chest. Suddenly, it felt heavier than before. "Why would someone leave that there?" I asked softly. Damien did not answer immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the token inside the bag, like he was staring at a ghost, because someone wanted me to know they were here. A chill slid slowly through my stomach. Luca tugged gently at Damien's sleeve. "Uncle Damien?" Damien blinked once before the coldness disappeared from his expression almost instantly. Not completely. Just enough. He crouched beside Luca again with controlled calm. "Go upstairs with Sophia for a little while." But Luca, the little boy, hesitated before nodding reluctantly. Sophia appeared moments later from the hallway and gently guided him away, though not before Luca looked back toward me nervously. "Do not leave," he whispered. My chest tightened painfully. "I will not." Once they disappeared upstairs, the hallway felt colder somehow. Damien remained standing perfectly still beside the evidence bag, while rain battered faintly against distant windows somewhere above us. "Tell Marco I want every camera feed reviewed from the last 6 hours," he instructed one of the guards. "Nobody leaves the property." "Yes, sir." The men dispersed quickly afterward, leaving only Damien and me standing beneath the soft emergency lights. I watched him carefully now, the tension in his shoulders, the stillness in his hands. He looked calm, but I was starting to understand Damien Moretti well enough to recognize when calm became dangerous. "You know who left it." His gaze shifted toward me slowly. "I know who used to carry one." "Used to." The word settled uneasily between us. "Damien." My voice softened carefully. "Talk to me." For a second I thought he would refuse. Then unexpectedly, he started walking toward the staircase leading upstairs. "Come with me." We moved through the mansion in silence afterward. The house had gone strangely quiet following the alarm. Guards remained stationed near every hallway, but conversations stayed low now, controlled, watchful. Rain streaked against the enormous windows overlooking Manhattan, while thunder rolled somewhere distant across the skyline. Damien led me toward the upper west wing of the mansion, where the lights dimmed softer and the architecture changed subtly from cold luxury to something older, more personal. Family photographs lined portions of the hallway here, black and white images inside expensive silver frames. A younger Damien standing beside an older man with identical green eyes. Luca, as a baby, wrapped in blue blankets. Sophia smiling beside a dark-haired woman holding a little boy on her hip. We stopped before a closed wooden door at the end of the hallway. Damien hesitated only briefly before opening it. The room inside felt frozen in time. My breath caught instantly. Soft blue walls, shelves filled with books and old vinyl records, a piano near the windows overlooking the city. Everything covered lightly in dust like nobody had truly lived here for years. Damien stepped inside slowly. This was my sister's room. I looked toward him in surprise. Luca's mother? He nodded once. Gianna. The way he said her name told me everything. Love, loss, regret. I moved farther into the room, carefully, while Damien remained near the doorway. Photographs covered the shelves, beside the piano. One immediately caught my attention. Gianna, smiling brightly, beside a much younger Damien, standing protectively behind her with one hand resting on her shoulder. She looked nothing like I expected. Warm brown eyes, soft smile, kindness practically glowing from her face. She looks happy, I whispered. Damien stared at the photograph, quietly. She was. Silence stretched softly between us, while rain tapped against the windows. Finally, Damien crossed toward one of the bookshelves and opened a small wooden box resting near the piano. Inside sat another subway token identical to the one around my neck. My pulse stumbled immediately. There are 3, I realized quietly. Damien nodded once without looking at me. My father gave one to each of us when we were kids. His fingers brushed lightly across the old silver token. He used to take us through the city on Sunday. Subway rides, pizza in Brooklyn, cheap museums. A faint humorless smile touched his mouth briefly, before everything became complicated. Something about hearing Damien speak like this unsettled me deeply, because this version of him sounded heartbreakingly normal. Not the feared man from headlines, just a brother remembering simpler days. Gianna carried hers everywhere, he continued softly, even after she married. My stomach tightened slowly. Married who? Damien finally looked at me then. A man I told her not to trust. The air shifted immediately after those words. Heavy. Regret filled the room so thickly I could almost feel it pressing against my skin. What happened? Damien stared back toward the rain-soaked windows overlooking Manhattan. 5 years ago, Gianna died in what police called a car accident. He paused. It was not an accident. Cold slid sharply through my chest. Someone killed her. Damien's jaw tightened once. Someone wanted to send me a message. Silence swallowed the room afterward. My heart hurt unexpectedly watching him stand there carrying grief like armor beneath perfectly tailored clothes. Suddenly, so many things made terrible sense. The way he protected Luca, the fear in the little boy's eyes, around loud noises. The subway token, around my neck. The token at the gate, I whispered carefully. You think whoever left it is connected to Gianna? Damien's eyes darkened immediately. I know they are. Fear curled slowly through my stomach. Then why leave it now? His gaze locked onto mine with terrifying intensity. Because someone finally realized what you are becoming to me. The room went completely still. My pulse hammered unevenly against my ribs. Damien, do not. His voice lowered dangerously. Do not ask me questions unless you are prepared for the answers. My breath caught hard. The distance between us suddenly felt too small, too charged. Rain rolled down the windows behind him, while the city glowed silver beneath the storm outside. I barely know you, I whispered. Something painful flickered across his face. That is the problem. Before I could respond, a sudden crack of thunder shook the mansion hard enough to rattle the windows. Instinctively, I flinched. Damien moved immediately. One hand caught my uninjured arm. Before I even realized he crossed the room. Warm, steady, too close. My breath tangled instantly. He looked down at me with something raw hidden beneath all that control for the first time since I met him. "Claire," he said softly, "if they are bringing Gianna into this now," his fingers tightened slightly against my arm, "it means they are planning to come for you next."